I really appreciate having this chance to share my proposal, entitled Personal, Social, and Emotional Impacts of Participation in a Music Performance-Based Ensemble During COVID-19. A little bit of background about me. I'm currently a fine arts instructional supervisor. Before that, I spent 13 years as an elementary, middle, and high school band director. From a student perspective, currently Notre Dame, Maryland University. I received my master's from Towson University, and I did my undergrad work at James Madison University. This study proposal shines a light on two subject areas I consider myself to be a lifelong learner of: social emotional learning and music education. So I'd like to start with just a brief overview what we're going to do today. So we're going to have a brief introduction. We're going to look at the conceptual and theoretical frameworks. We're going to look at the research questions and the research methodology. There is a lot of information in the slide deck. Obviously, we don't have the time for me to read everything, nor is that good pedagogy. But in the event you have questions or would like a copy of this after it is there. So the introduction. Start by looking at student mental health prior to COVID-19. Between 2010 and 2020, suicide was the second leading cause of death among adolescents aged 12 to 17. 1 in 5 students has significant thoughts of suicide. The literature has showed us right away COVID-19 eroded the mental health of students even further. Some information about COVID. I'm not going to go into this, but what I'd like you to know, by 2021, we're looking at 1.2 million people across 215 countries dead. By March of 2020, 95% of students around the world were impacted by countrywide school closures. So what is the literature telling us? Almost immediately, with the shift in education, the crude death rate for children was low. However, they were impacted. Right away, we're seeing higher rates of depression, anxiety. 43% of students began to feel lonely. 50% began to feel isolated. 1/3 began to feel nervous, anxious, or depressed. The literature also shows us children are generally more at risk for developing post-traumatic stress disorders than adults. We see this in the literature through Hurricane Katrina. Same sort of situation. We also saw in the aftermath, it was a prolonged negative experience. Anxiety, depression, academic performance, extracurricular activity, participation. It is incumbent upon school systems. We are back, but we need to continue monitoring our kids. We need to continue finding ways to make sure they are okay. And this is where we're going to start shining a light on my other subject area, music education, and looking at if participation in a music performance-based ensemble, looking at band, chorus, or orchestra, could potentially help to offer that support. So when you look at the benefits of music in general, we know the literature shows us music can impact humans physically, socially, and emotionally. It helps manage stress levels. Scans show greater activation in areas of the brain critical to analyzing and understanding others. When you begin to look at music through the lens of participation in band, chorus, or orchestra, the literature, there's researchers telling us we need more qualitative data to look at these connections. We found in the literature there's a choir of homeless and marginalized members that felt connected through singing. We see how music can impact people later in life. We can see how group drumming has impacted rehab situations. And then we can also see in university situations where participation in choirs has impacted social and emotional learning. Here's where the gap in the literature occurs. So we see this mainly in the literature in adults, college-age students. There's a gap in exploring those connections in elementary, middle, and high school students, and we also see that gap during COVID-19. So that brings me to the theoretical framework I'm going to work with. So when we talk about social emotional learning, we're talking about CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. They're kind of the big name in social emotional learning. And they have these 4 core competencies that serve as a leader in school-based social emotional learning. So it's broken down into personal effects of self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, and social effects of social awareness and relationship skills. And the literature has shown, has offered that these CASEL core competencies are used effectively in schools as a model. So I'm going to use that as my framework to explore the perceived experiences of students who participated in a music performance-based ensemble during COVID-19. So when you look at music through this lens of social emotional learning, the literature shows us, yeah, in music classes, your music ability is elevated, but there's also connections there with these CASEL core competencies. Varner in 2020 suggested participation in music actually helps reinforce these CASEL core competencies, and he further suggested in 2021 the CASEL framework can be used as an effective tool in helping students affected by traumatic life experiences such as COVID-19. So that brings me to my conceptual framework, which visually depicts how participation in a Mid-Atlantic school system Music performance-based ensemble during the 2020-2021 school year impacted students' social and emotional well-being. So what you see here, it's a music staff. If you're not familiar with the music staff, it's 5 lines, it's 4 spaces. Musicians, you put notes on, at, or above, and it gives us notes. It tells us what to play or sing. And you see as the notes, these CASEL core competencies. So you have the student's social and emotional well-being, you have CASEL, you have the social effects, you have the personal effects, and that comes together to represent during COVID participation in a Mid-Atlantic State school system music performance-based ensemble. All right, so the research questions. So the proposed study, we're going to focus on the experience of these students themselves, but also to help triangulation of data, we're also going to look at music educator perspectives and parent perspectives. So the research questions that will help to guide this study, this I will read verbatim to you. So what are student perceptions in a Mid-Atlantic State school system music performance-based ensemble during COVID-19? So how did students in a Mid-Atlantic State school system perceive the impact of participation in a music performance-based ensemble on the personal effects of self-awareness, self-management, and responsible decision-making during the COVID-19 pandemic? How did students at a Mid-Atlantic State school system perceive the impact of participation in a music performance-based ensemble on the social effects of relationship skills and social awareness during the COVID-19 pandemic? What are caregiver perceptions of the personal and social impacts of participation in a music performance-based ensemble during COVID-19? And what are music educator perceptions of the personal and social impacts of participation in a music performance-based ensemble during COVID-19? All right, so that brings us to the methodology. I love stories. I love telling stories. I love sharing stories. I love hearing stories. I love writing stories. This study is about stories of participants, hence my reason for qualitative research design. Furthermore, we're looking at multiple participants. So we're trying to find this shared experience, a shared essence. And we're going to look at that through Husserl and this concept of noema and noesis. Noema being the phenomenon that is experienced, and the noesis, that is the way the phenomenon is experienced. So as this proposed study intends to provide the in-depth description of the realities of these lived experiences, including an analysis and meaning from the shared experience, I believe a qualitative phenomenological study research method is appropriate. All right, so the researchers led. We're going to talk about validity a lot through this because, as we know, in a qualitative study, the researchers should clarify their position, orientation, and bias. As I mentioned, I am a fine arts instructional supervisor. I'm a fine arts instructional supervisor in the school system where the study will occur. Also, I was a lead member of a committee sponsored by the State Education Agency in which a study will occur to draft a state document outlining the connections between music and SEL. During COVID-19, I was in charge with the research school system's plan to continue music education during COVID-19. However, those experience coupled with feedback from community during COVID-19 has actually left me skeptical as to whether music performance-based ensembles were viewed positively during COVID-19. So when you take that background and the skepticism, I believe that's going to help bring a critical regard to the study, and that critical lens will help strengthen the study, help address the threats to internal validity, and help guide the journey. And later on, we're going to talk about credibility and trustworthiness some more. So site selection, the research study will occur in a rural school system located in the Mid-Atlantic State. Participant selection, I'm looking at a smaller sample size to allow participants a locatable voice in the study while also allowing for intensive analysis. So as we talked about already, inclusion criteria, band, course, or orchestra student in grade 3 through 12 during 2020-2021, music educators and caregivers. With all that being said, looking at a homogeneous sampling strategy. So as far as the groupings go, when we look at the kids, so we're going to have an elementary grouping, a middle school grouping, and a high school grouping. And each one's going to have 6 students. So in the elementary grouping, we're going to have 2 band students, 2 course students, 2 orchestra students. In the middle school grouping, 2 band, 2 course, 2 orchestra. High school, 2 band, 2 course, 2 orchestra. Each group is going to participate in focus group interviews. As far as the caregivers, 2 caregivers of elementary, 2 caregivers of middle, 2 caregivers of high school. About music educators, 3 elementary educators, 1 band, 1 course, 1 orchestra. 3 middle, same thing, band, course, orchestra. 3 high school, 1 band, 1 course, 1 orchestra. Recruitment process, complete IRB, obviously. I've already received permission to conduct the study in the research school system. As part of that, the band, course, and orchestra director will distribute to their students a letter describing the study. For students who have already graduated, the author will ask the high school directors to contact potential participants. Interested participants will be asked to complete a Google survey if a student is under 18. A caregiver will be asked to complete it along with the consent form. Each student who participates will receive a $10 Amazon gift card. Data collection process. So with the children, we're looking at focus group interviews. So focus group interviews are used increasingly in research with children, as children are generally comfortable and familiar with the process of discussing matters in groups. We'll conduct this via Zoom. One-on-one interviews will occur with caregivers and music educators through semi-structured, open-ended questions. Those participants will be given a choice of whether they want to participate via Zoom or some type of online platform or in person. Keeping with the collection theme, the Zoom interviews will be recorded by the platform's recording feature. In person will be recorded with Voice Record Pro app. Afterward, it'll be uploaded into Rev for transcription. Remember checking after the transcriptions are completed. Participants will receive a copy via email for review. The interview questions are presented in two categories. We're talking about those personal effect questions and those social effect questions, all aligned with the CASEL core competencies. Pilot study to help inform all of this. So back towards the end of 2021, when COVID was just wrapping up, I completed a semi-structured interview via Zoom with a third grade cello student, again, via Zoom. So for the coding process, I read the transcript, close examination of data, gave names and categories to the emergent phenomena, and then we grouped into themes. To assist with the validity of this pilot study, another music educator independently coded the transcript, and the interviewee, was also provided a copy for accuracy. So 3 themes from this pilot study emerged. So the perceived impact of personal effects, the perceived impact on social effects, and then one I wasn't expecting was teacher effects. So, and additionally, the interviewee discussed throughout her responses her connection with her peers, but also how she felt her peers were connecting with her and the music. So that all that information ultimately helped to establish the interview protocol and ended up including focus group interviews with children and including teachers and including the caregivers. All right, so data analysis. Began to research and really kept coming back to transcendental phenomenology to help analyze, but also with a potential bias. So we're going to start attempting to bracket out my experiences with EPA-K. We're going to collect the data, the interviews. We're going to review the data, highlight significant statements, sentence quotes that help to offer an understanding of how participants experience the phenomenon. We're going to develop clusters of meaning from these statements into themes. The themes will be used to compose a description of what the participants experienced. And then we're going to create structural descriptions of the context or setting that influenced how the participants experienced the phenomenon. From those structural descriptions, we're going to create a composite description that offers the essence of the phenomenon. So to help with the validity, so after the initial data analysis, I'm going to share all of this with a colleague who received his PhD in 2012 from the University of Maryland. He also completed a qualitative music study. So I'm going to ask him to review both the coding and the analysis. Also, throughout the analysis process, I'll be examining rival explanations to see if they occur. So let's get into the credibility and trustworthiness. So we know in qualitative studies, researcher bias and subjectivity are presumed to be part of conducting that research. How that is viewed and how we manage the bias possibility, that's crucial. The first thing I need to do is shine a light on my expectations, bias, and assumptions. It's something to be very open, clear, and honest about. It needs to be explicit. So after do that, then we're going to look at the concept of bracketing out, looking at everything from a blank slate, being completely open and receptive. This transcendence from the natural attitude of everyday life through EPA-K, also known as bracketing. So we know we can't do that to 100% fidelity. So what do we do next? And this is where I'm going to bring in this reflexive journaling to keep track of my personal thoughts and feelings while examining the data to help serve as a guidepost to help remind me that, okay, am I really looking at this through the lens of the participants, or is this more of my personal circumstances, and being very, very clear about that. Also triangulation of data, using those multiple data sources to help develop this comprehensive understanding through the teacher interviews and the caregiver interviews. More journaling. So in addition to the potential bias, looking at evidence of corroboration, making note if any unanticipated events happening during interviews, like the recorder malfunctions or something, but also helping along log assertions or rival explanations while moving back and forth between description and interpretation. Transferability and dependability, trying to be as clear as possible so the reader can make transferability judgments based on what I provide. And I will do that through thick descriptions of the phenomenon that includes the subjective experience of the participants, outlining potential bias, being clear about that, and being clear about the research methods. Hopefully that'll allow the reader to understand the phenomenon and draw their own interpretations. And I wanted to put in here, like this, the topic of study could potentially apply to other school systems with similar programs, but this study is not necessarily meant to offer conclusions that can be generalized to all who participated in a music ensemble during COVID-19. The intent is to shine a spotlight on the lived experiences of these participants. Assumptions, they all participated in some way or another in a music performance-based ensemble during COVID-19. Also assuming that they'll be cooperative and provide accurate perceptions of their experiences. Limitations, we're talking about 33 people in a small rural school system. So transferable study results may be limited in other school systems. And also going back to this potential bias piece, how that's being mitigated. I need to be open and forthright about my position in the research school system and how that will be confronted. Ethical concerns, IRB process, maintaining privacy of the school system and participants. I'm trying to do that in our presentation here as well. Anyone under 18, caregivers will complete the appropriate forms. Settings and questions will be limited to what is essential. All files on a password-protected computer. And just kind of as a closing statement, so in addition to filling a current literature gap, if the author's findings indicate a positive connection between students who participated in a music performance-based ensemble during COVID-19 and positive social and emotional competencies, then perhaps music education could become another tool to help cut away the web in which the predator known as COVID-19 entangled our students. That's a lot to say without taking a sip of water. So thank you very much. I welcome questions.
All right, questions for Todd?
What was my time on that, by the way? I'm curious. I was trying to get it under 20. I was told I had 20.
It was like 18 minutes. It was good.
Okay.
I expect a musician to really keep track of time. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, questions?
So this is all interviews?
Correct.
Did we look at the protocol? Did we? I'm sorry, I had looked away. Okay.
I included it in the proposal.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna say it's
Let me pull
there.
that up. I mean, I love the study. I was in the orchestra, I was in the band, I was in the chorus. My mother's a music teacher. I almost majored in music. It paid for college. That was nice.
Okay.
And all of your hypotheses resonate with me. There's something ineffable about performing in an ensemble with your peers. Just in an orchestra and a choir, you always have to think about the others in relation to yourself.
Right.
And that's a huge part of socio-emotional learning. I think I don't have a question. I just want to talk about how much sense the study makes. And I'm glad that you're doing it. Seems like there's a gap in the literature. I wrote a white paper about OrCids, which is the after school program in Baltimore City. I never did send it into a journal, which is my bad. But it was a quasi-experimental study, and it seemed that participation in OrCids, it had a positive impact not only on achievement, but also on student attendance rates, like during the school day. So there's something there as well. I know attendance isn't directly an SEL measure, but SEL certainly plays into attendance.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm gonna look up the protocol right now.
I don't have any questions, but I have a suggestion for you.
Okay.
Because you're using people under 18, most likely the IRB will really scrutinize what you're going to do. And so a conversation with the IRB chair is probably a clever idea earlier rather than later. For instance, using Google Survey, a Google survey, I think, is much less protected than other platforms that you can use to survey participants. I remember when I did a project 4 or 5 years ago, that was an issue using Google Survey. And I cannot tell you the details here because I don't recall them, but I do recall that we moved away from Google Survey. That's just a detail, but
Yes.
but particularly, whenever anybody under 18 is involved, as you probably are well aware, It has to get full review, and we have a very, good IRB right now, I think, but that's just something to really keep in mind. And the other suggestion I have for you is when you do the coding, make sure you refer to the literature on coding. Saldana is the classic text,
text.
becoming the classic text, has become the classic text. So I would definitely have a very good look at that if you haven't already.
And
Thank
Todd,
you.
I have an electronic version of the previous edition of the Saldana text. If you don't want to buy it, I'm happy to send it to you.
That would be outstanding.
I think it's publicly available, the 2013 version anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's available. So I use it in my class. So if you want it, I can send it to you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
I'm excited about this. I was a course student for years and years and years, staying in college too. And so I love this idea.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the interviews. I'm really
Mhm.
excited.